Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, devastated, shock and sadness across the South after Hurricane Ida levels entire neighborhoods, leaving at least 2 people dead and more than 1 million without power.
This is unreal. This is nothing I've ever seen before.
Never have a major loss like this.
The search and rescue efforts now underway, plus why it could take weeks before the power grid is restored. Out of Afghanistan after 20 years, America's longest war is over. The last of U.S. troops flew out of Kabul airport. Details on the final hours of the American mission, plus what's next for Afghanistan as it begins a new era under Taliban rule. Breaking overnight, up in flames, a fast-moving fire raging across the West Coast, once again threatening homes and now forcing people out of a popular resort town. The evacuations in place, plus the challenges ahead for firefighters, as not one but 2 governors declare states of emergency. And kicked out of preschool. You heard that right. Tens of thousands of young children being suspended or expelled from preschools each year. Why researchers say the problem may not be the kids. And as you just heard there with those numbers, it's actually a lot more common than you'd think.
I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, I know. We'll get into that a little bit later. But this morning, more than 1 million people across Louisiana are without power, and many more can't return to their homes following one of the most powerful hurricanes to hit the U.S. mainland.
Now that Ida has moved out of the state, we're getting a better look at the damage. This is video from Grand Isle, Louisiana, close to where Ida made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. It's still hard to get to the island this morning, hampering efforts to rescue those who are stranded. Parts of some of the roads are gone and many homes are damaged beyond repair. According to the president of Jefferson Parish, Grand Isle's mayor thinks everyone in town survived, but that 100% of the buildings there were damaged or destroyed. In nearby Lafitte, this is the scene. The parish president says the town is underwater in ways they have never seen before. At least 135 people have been rescued from the floodwaters so far. And in New Orleans, the entire city remains in the dark, and some could be without power for weeks. The city's mayor is now warning people who left ahead of the storm, do not come back until further notice. Joining us now from New Orleans is NBC News correspondent Jay Gray. Jay, weeks without power in New Orleans. How badly was the city's power grid damaged, and how are they handling this?
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, good morning to you. We'll start with the end of your question first. And right now, everything going as best you could imagine. People with a good can-do spirit and saying that they can get through this, but understanding it's going to take some time. Remember, it's hot, it's humid here. It's going to get difficult the longer this lingers. And you're right, it's going to take a while. Here's the situation with the power. There are 8 transmission lines that run all of the electricity into New Orleans. They're in the Mississippi River right now. They were knocked down from a tower and pushed into the river. They've got to be extracted, they've got to be repaired and somehow elevated again. When you just think about that process, it's an ominous task, and it's going to take a lot of time. So I don't see that there's any way, and I think most that I've talked to here agree, that this power can be restored within the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a long haul, like so much in this region right now.
Jay, when we saw you yesterday, it was still dark outside. Now people have had a day to assess the damage. Yeah. What are you seeing across the city and across the area?
Yeah, just complete devastation. In fact, I want to give you a look at some of the damage here in downtown New Orleans. If you look behind me, you can see the face of this building just ripped away, the bricks thrown to the side, and this plays out not only along every block here in the New Orleans metro area, but these scenes are much worse across all of southeast Louisiana right now. In the coastal region, it was the water, it's the flooding, the storm surge, and the rain that caused the problems. Here it is that lack of power and the wind, that severe wind that pounded this city for 4 or 5 hours, just tearing apart everything that's in its path. So that's what they're dealing with here. The recovery effort, the cleanup will begin in earnest a bit later today when we get the sunrise. It's starting to come up here, not quite up yet, but they've got 5,000 National Guard troops on the ground. you've got teams from 30 states as far away as California moving in to help as well. It's going to be help they desperately need.
Absolutely. All right, Jay Gray reporting from New Orleans. Jay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
A new video this morning shows a woman being pulled from her car as floodwaters rise in one New Orleans street. She was rescued by an off-duty Italian naval officer. Several people across the Gulf Coast had to be rescued from rising floodwaters. The number of rescues is expected to rise, especially as roads are cleared and crews are given the okay to access parts of Louisiana ravaged by Ida. Nicole Mall from the American Red Cross joins us now. Nicole, good morning. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time this morning. Now, you're on the ground, I believe, in Baton Rouge. So what's your team seeing in terms of rescues right now?
You know, what we're seeing right now is we're caring for about 2,000 people who've been affected across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. So what that means is those are families who couldn't stay at home, right, who had to evacuate. Maybe they've had power outages. Hurricane Ida is going to go down in history as a very, very significant storm. And our priority mission right now is to really take care of these people who've been affected. We're seeing the footage. We're seeing the damage. We're talking with folks. And the greatest thing that we can do right now is make sure we are here to shelter and care for these folks who've been affected by Ida.
And now, Nicole, I mean, this is the second year in a row that Louisiana's been hit by a major hurricane, with Hurricane Laura last year. Of course, we all remember Katrina back in 2005. How's the damage like this time around, and what's it like responding to the same area a second year in a row? How are people doing?
Having the chance to talk with some of the folks who are staying with the Red Cross, it's interesting because the one common thread that we're finding in this is that Louisiana is home. And so while each storm takes a very unique toll on a person, what we're finding is people, this is their home, right? So as long as they're here and as resilient and as strong as they are, we're here to take care of them. And, you know, to see these back-to-back storms, just to see, history being made time and time again, it's just absolutely devastating. And for us, our focus to be able to care for these people, even when things feel uncertain, and to see this damage, it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And Nicole, what are they telling you they need right now? What's the biggest thing on the ground that these people are needing?
You know, I think from our conversations, it's don't forget about Louisiana. Do not forget about Mississippi, right? This is home for people, right? And when we as the Red Cross come here, it's to help shelter, to help take care of people. We're waiting for access from our our parish and our state partners that we can get food, get relief supplies. But for the folks staying in our care, we want to make this top of mind, because for every family who's been affected by a disaster, this is the biggest disaster in their life. And, if you're looking to support, you can visit redcross.org, become a volunteer, make a donation, and we're going to be here as long as needed.
Nicole Mall, thank you so much for what you're doing. And again, thank you for some of your time this morning. Good luck.
Stay safe.
This morning, Ida is still a threat, with flash flood watches impacting 53 million people.
NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is here to tell us the latest. Hi, Bill. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And those numbers continue to jump, too. And unfortunately, more tragedy from Ida in southern Mississippi last night. In Loosedale, Mississippi, a highway washed out, Highway 26. Vehicles drove into that, not knowing it, being it was dark. 2 fatalities, 10 injuries, and 3 of those are critical. So we have, we're still watching the effects of this storm. All that water is pooling up all from the heavy rain, and the rivers are very high. Everywhere in blue on the map behind me, we have moderate to major river flooding. And on top of that, we've had some tremendous amounts of rain last night over the Biloxi area in Mobile. And this is 2 days in a row now that Mobile has been a flash flood warning. So be careful driving in those areas early today. And still with 1 million people without power, this afternoon, New Orleans, heat index will be 100 degrees. At night, the temperature's only dropping down into the upper 70s to low 80s. Very uncomfortable conditions. And there's no sign that that's going to break either, even into Wednesday. Usually, New Orleans doesn't cool off off to mid-September, maybe even the end of September. So it is going to be a tough go of it if this power outage is going to last weeks. As far as the storm goes, it's a tropical depression. The winds are not an issue, but that heavy rain is, and you can see all the bright yellow in Tennessee. Nashville's getting some very heavy rain right now. 79 million people is the updated number for the flash flood watches from D.C. to New York, including southern portions of New England. Get ready for an extremely short period heavy rain event. So today, the heaviest rain, Nashville to Lexington through areas of West Virginia later tonight. And then tomorrow, this is going to be a tremendous rain event. Look at how much rain we're going to get in areas like Harrisburg, Philadelphia, New York City could get 5 inches of rain. That would approach a daily September record if we get that much. And the Poconos, watch out in the mountains too. Isolated totals up to 6 inches of rain. So you get the idea, guys. Just because this storm is much weaker, we are not done with it yet. Yesterday, we had 8 tornadoes reported. We do have a chance of tornadoes today from Atlanta down through Macon to Tallahassee. 15 million people are included in the slight risk of severe weather, including a little sliver there just south of Washington, D.C. So numerous storm threats. Just because the wind is gone and the surge is gone, the rain from this storm is going to be a huge issue. Can you imagine if New York City gets 5 inches of rain in about 6 to 8 hours, especially after Henri only 8-9 days ago? Problems ahead.
Yeah. All right.
Oof.
We know you'll stay on it. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill. See you in a little bit.
At 3:29 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday, the last C-17 took off from Kabul airport, meaning America's longest war is officially over.
Yeah, that means that nearly 20 years after the U.S. invasion, the Taliban are back in charge. The 18th U.S. Airborne posted this picture to Twitter. That's Commanding General Chris Donahue of the 82nd Airborne, the last American service member to leave Afghanistan. In the past 17 days, about 123,000 people have been evacuated, including more than 6,000 Americans. CENTCOM Commander General Kenneth McKenzie spoke to the nation about the end of an era for the United States.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. No words from me could possibly capture the full measure of sacrifices and accomplishments of those who served, nor the emotions they're feeling at this moment.
President Biden is expected to speak about the end of the U.S. mission in Afghanistan this afternoon.
We have a team of reporters covering every angle. NBC News global correspondent Raf Sanchez is in Doha, Qatar, reporting on the refugee resettlement there. And NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us from the White House in Washington.
Good morning to both of you. Raf, I'll start with you. Now, of course, I mentioned that President Biden's going to be speaking later today, and the White House is going to have to contend with the fact that there are still Americans that were left behind in Afghanistan. So the big question here, of course, is how is the State Department working to get them out?
Savannah, Joe, that's right. The State Department says there are between 100 and 200 Americans still in Afghanistan and trying to get out. These are folks who, for whatever reason, were not able to get to the airport in Kabul and get themselves evacuated. They may have been outside of the capital city and unable to travel through Taliban-controlled territory to get to Kabul. They may be U.S. citizens who knew that they could get on the plane, but would not be able to bring their families with them. Now, Secretary Blinken said last night the effort to get those people as well as Afghan allies does not end just because the military evacuation is over. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose. We believe there are still a small number of Americans, under 200 and likely closer to 100, who remain in Afghanistan and want to leave.
Now, the fortress-like American embassy in Kabul is being relocated here to Doha, Qatar. That is going to be the focus point for getting those people out of Afghanistan. But, guys, this is not at all straightforward. Even if the Taliban cooperates, which is a big if, the civilian side of Kabul airport is not functional, so people can't fly out right now. That raises the possibility they may have to make a treacherous land journey to one of Afghanistan's neighboring countries and try to evacuate from there. Guys?
And, Raf, what happens next with the Afghan refugee resettlement? Is the world potentially facing a crisis here that could last for years?
Yeah, so getting people off the tarmac in Kabul is just the first step of a very long journey. 122,000 people have been evacuated. Only a little more than 10% of them have actually reached the United States, flying into either Dulles or Philadelphia. The overwhelming majority of Afghan evacuees are at transit points like here in Doha, at the American military base in Ramstein, Germany. They are going through security vetting. They are going through coronavirus testing, and they face a very long wait before they find out where will be their final homes after leaving their countries. I will tell you, the European nations are very, very concerned that beyond those Afghan evacuees, there could be a wave of refugees leaving Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, potentially heading for Turkey, and then eventually to Europe, a repeat of that mass Syrian refugee crisis we saw in 2015. The message right now from the Europeans is do not come this way. They are trying to get agreements with third countries to keep those Afghan refugees rather than having them head to Europe. Guys?
Now, Mike, let's bring you in here. As we mentioned, we expect to hear from President Biden on this afternoon. Do you have any indication what he might say?
Well, Savannah, I think it's so striking to many people that we did not already hear from President Biden, that yesterday the announcement came from the head of Central Command. And then, of course, we heard from Secretary of State Tony Blinken later about what is now a diplomatic mission in Afghanistan. But White House officials say that was all by design. They wanted these two officials to get into the technical details of what happens now that we have ended our 20-year presence in Afghanistan, so that the president can use his remarks today to speak much higher level to the American people, to explain yet again his decision, why he thinks this is ultimately the right one for American national security interests, but also to level with Americans about the sacrifices they've made over the past 20 years, including very powerfully just in the last few weeks as this evacuation effort went, obviously with tragic circumstances with the loss of 13 American service members. And so the president will cast a large net and attempt to put all of this into perspective and to speak about the challenges now moving forward.
All right, Mike Memoli, Raf Sanchez, thanks so much for your reporting. Appreciate it. Coming up, breaking overnight, firefighters on the West Coast battling a wildfire as it races toward famed ski resorts.
Yeah, we'll bring you the latest on the Caldor fire as entire communities are forced to flee from their homes. That's next on Morning News Now. The resort city of South Lake Tahoe in California would typically be full of tourists this time of year. Instead, the Caldor fire is forcing thousands to evacuate. The fire has consumed more than 186,000 acres and is now just 15% contained. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson is following the latest. Hi, Steve. Good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Not to mince words, right now, firefighters are locked in a desperate struggle to save South Lake Tahoe, but they are up against it with dry conditions, fresh red flag winds moving in, and thousands of homes in the path of flames.
Yeah, where are you?
This morning, an army of flames is marching towards South Lake Tahoe. The fast-moving Caldor fire, driven by gusty winds, is closing in on the famed California resort town, threatening to wipe out more than 20,000 homes.
There is fire activity happening in California that we have never seen before.
With summer vacations in full swing, most of the region has been ordered to evacuate immediately, causing a crush of people to flee the region. The mass exodus causing gridlock on the roads, thousands of cars clogging highways as people flee to neighboring Nevada.
This is crazy. They should have planned this a little better. They should get some more traffic going out here instead of 2 lanes.
Firefighters are struggling as powerful red flag winds are pushing the fire's eastern front into Tahoe, with wind gusts up to 50 miles an hour. Fire crews are using every available tool to fight the flames, but low humidity and steep terrain are a challenge at every turn.
And the fire was very active. It's been very destructive to certain areas here.
The erratic Caldor fire first sparked more than 2 weeks ago. After destroying nearly 500 structures and charring close to 200,000 acres, it's become the highest firefighting priority in the U.S. A drain of resources so dramatic, California's governor declaring a state of emergency. There are so many fires burning in the state, overnight all national forests in California were ordered to temporarily shut down. Officials hope that will help reduce the number of new fires and prevent people from getting trapped in burning forest. Meanwhile, the battle for South Lake Tahoe being waged in a field of flames, now roaring at the gates.
And right now, there are 13 large active wildfires burning across the state of California, currently charring some 1.4 million acres. This fire, which is now close to 200,000 acres, burning for more than 2 weeks, is only 15% contained. Savannah?
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Stay safe.
Tennis fans heading to the U.S. Open hope they'll get through security a little bit faster today. Yesterday, they were forced to wait in the sweltering heat to get into the tournament for opening day. Here's a look at how long some of those lines were. Fans say it took them 1 to 2 hours to get through security, forcing some to miss the earlier matches. Despite the wait time, most people were happy to have tennis back in New York. Last year's tournament was closed to spectators because of COVID-19. 17-year-old Coco Gauff was moved by the number of fans in the stands, saying, quote, "It almost brought me to tears." NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns joins us from outside the U.S. Open in Queens, New York with more. So, Dasha, day one of the U.S. Open was frustrating for many fans who just wanted to get inside and watch. Why were they forced to wait so long to get in?
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, it's quiet right now, these early morning hours, but yesterday this whole area was packed with tennis fans. This is the first tennis major to allow full capacity since the pandemic. So in many ways, day one was sort of a welcoming back of the sport and also a welcoming back of New York City. Last night, you had Billie Jean King in prime time saying, "Welcome back, New York." You had Broadway performers putting on a show, and you had fans that were very much ready to be back here, and you saw those folks coming here in droves. Now, it's not clear what exactly led to those long delays, but the U.S. Tennis Association did acknowledge those challenges. They said it was in part because people came a little bit later than usual. They also said people brought more bags than usual that all needed to be searched at security, which created some of those bottlenecks. But yeah, Joe, at one point you had a line maybe 5,000 people long, a quarter mile long. So you did have some frustrated fans, but it does seem like once people actually got in there, there was a lot of enthusiasm to see the sport come back here in New York City, Joe.
Yeah, obviously these images different from last year's tournament. No fans allowed to watch because of COVID. Yeah. This year fans are back, but with vaccine protocols put in place really at the last minute. So what are the rules to attend? And did those restrictions really affect any of the wait times to get in?
Yeah, Joe, when the tickets first went on sale, the tournament had very few restrictions, which really alarmed local leaders here. We're in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, and Corona, Queens. When New York was the epicenter of the pandemic, it was the epicenter of the epicenter. So folks here really did see the worst of COVID-19. And after pressure from local leaders, from Mayor Bill de Blasio, just over the weekend, it was announced that fans would need to provide proof of vaccination, proof of at least one shot in order to get in. But interestingly, Joe, that same rule does not apply for players. And we know that only about half or so of the players at the U.S. Open this year are vaccinated. Though we do hear from the U.S. Tennis Association, they don't believe that the vaccination element, the proof of vaccination, created any of those bottlenecks in the process. And they're hoping that things will go a little bit smoother today, Joe.
Interesting that only half the players are vaccinated. Now, today's match is set to begin in a few hours. What are you expecting to see from the crowds today?
Well, if yesterday was any indication, I think the enthusiasm will still be here. The U.S. Tennis Association did say that they are looking for solutions to make this a smoother and quicker process. And maybe after people have seen those images, they'll show up a little bit earlier today, Joe.
Yeah, good advice. I think if they saw what happened yesterday, they'll want to get there earlier than early. All right, Dasha Burns, thanks so much.
All right, now we have some bad news for Americans hoping to take a big vacation this fall. The European Union is recommending that Americans be banned from non-essential travel to its 27 countries as the Delta variant fuels a surge in COVID infections here at home. Now, before the pandemic, more than 15 million Americans visited Europe each year, so this round of restrictions could cost the EU billions in tourism revenue. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from London to break down what you need to know. Megan, good morning. So, I mean, first off, what do Americans who have tickets booked or were planning to visit Europe this fall need to know?
Well, Savannah, good morning. And you know, it's a good question. And the answer here is pay close attention to the restrictions, requirements by the country that you want to travel to, because right now it's just a recommendation by the European Union to its 27 nations to not allow unvaccinated Americans to travel to Europe. At this point, we've not heard from any other country within Europe saying that they are going to adopt that guideline. But we could see that in the coming days or weeks ahead. So what Americans can expect if they're going to be traveling to Europe is really a patchwork of requirements to get into the country. And of course, it's important to pay attention because that's something that could change by the day, Savannah.
Absolutely. Now, let's keep in mind the reverse here, though. Also, the U.S. hasn't reopened its borders to European tourists. How do COVID-19 cases in Europe compare to infection rates here in the U.S.?
Yeah, you know, it's a good point that you mentioned, and there's a lot of frustration here in Europe by Europeans and even the European Union, speaking about the fact that in June they opened up the borders for U.S. travelers and that has not yet been reciprocated. And at this point, Europe is vaccinating its citizens at a higher rate than we see in the United States. And there's a recent study that just came out that showed that the infection rate in the United States is twice that of what we see in France, 3 times what we see in Spain, and then 5 times what's being seen in Italy right now. So as the Delta variant continues to rage in the U.S., the growing concern here in Europe is that it will come here and continue to ravage the nations across this continent.
And now, Megan, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, you're joining us from London, where this recommendation doesn't apply there in the U.K. What's their policy toward American travelers right now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, of course, we know Brexit taking effect the beginning of this year, which means that the UK is not a part of the EU. And so they have their own set of rules. And at this moment, the U.S. is on the amber list for the UK, which means that unvaccinated folks that are coming from the U.S. to the UK have to quarantine for a certain amount of time. Those who are vaccinated will have to fill out a locator form. They have to test negative, taking a PCR test before traveling to the UK. Once they arrive here in the country, they then have to do another PCR test 2 days after they arrive here. But as far as restrictions are concerned, it's nothing like what could come down for the rest of Europe. Savannah.
All right, Megan, thank you so much. Let's take a look now at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Claudia Labonga is with us this morning from Rome. Claudia, good morning.
Morning, Joe. Morning, Savannah. Well, COVID-19 cases in New Zealand have fallen for a second day in a row, 2 weeks after the country went into total lockdown. Now, the island, since the start of the pandemic, had been virtually COVID-free, but the Delta variant once again led to a rise in the contagion, and the government had to introduce some strict anti-COVID-19 measures. And now let's move to Brazil, where 3 people, including 2 civilians, were killed in a brazen bank robbery. Well, now about a dozen criminals armed with explosives and rifles took civilians hostages, and they used them as shield in their very elaborate escape. They used drones to monitor the police movement, and also they set up cars on fires here and there in strategic points so to make it harder for the police to chase them. And Paris, last but not least, is saying au revoir to speeding in the city by introducing a 19-mile-per-hour limit within the city to inspire Parisians to walk and cycle more. Now, of course, pedestrians and cyclists are very happy about that, but taxi and delivery drivers are saying c'est terrible, which is my terrible pronunciation of terrible in French, because they say that it hurts their business.
It's an interesting strategy, though. Just be like, you can go 5 miles an hour, and that's it.
Yeah.
So walk.
Or you're walking, yeah.
All right, thank you,
That's kind
Claudia.
of interesting. Thanks. Coming up, hurricane survivors seeking shelter during a pandemic.
Up next, the challenge to house evacuees in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida and prevent a surge in COVID cases. You're watching Morning News Now. Nike has closed its corporate offices this week to give its employees paid time off for a mental health break. A spokesman wrote on LinkedIn that the company was, quote, powering down, saying it's not just a week off for the team. It's an acknowledgement that we can prioritize mental health and still get work done. The week-long break comes ahead of the company's return to office plans in September. Nike isn't the first company to do this. Back in June, dating app Bumble gave employees a week off to help with burnout. Great idea. I saw a note from one of the Nike execs literally said, do not work. That's the key. It's like not just like don't log in, but just don't work.
Right. I love that. And what a great way to prioritize it. And I like that they said it's not just to give you a break, but it's we can do this and then we'll still be productive and maybe you'll come back even better.
Even more so. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Joe. Very cool. Now, after Hurricane Katrina ravaged New Orleans in 2005, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a $14.5 billion system of levees, gates, and flood walls around the Crescent City. It was one of the world's most complex infrastructure projects, and Hurricane Ida gave the system its biggest test yet. Joining us now is Kelly Chandler, Regional Director of the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority, which oversees the system. Kelly, good morning. We've been talking a lot about the system, so we are grateful to have you here with us to discuss it. So I know building this flood prevention system was a massive undertaking, and it was really designed to prevent another catastrophe like Katrina. So how would you say it performed?
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, we definitely had a huge test with Hurricane Ida, direct hit, major hurricane, and we're pleased to report that the system performed exactly as designed. We didn't have any levee overtopping, no breaches, and it was just a great success to all those involved. And I'd like to just say that, and most people don't know, it takes hundreds of people on a daily basis to operate and maintain this system. Mm-hmm. And I just want to thank them for their hard work, their dedication. We were working up until midnight the night before the hurricane hit to close off the system, and I'm just thankful for that team and their dedication. It's all happened.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind walking us through how the system works. I mean, we're seeing some footage there. Obviously, we're not exactly sure how it works, but you are. So what do you have to do before and during a storm to keep these communities from flooding?
Yeah, so the system contains multiple gates and structures that allow marine traffic and railways and pedestrians to go access, various locations throughout the city. So when a storm comes, we start monitoring it way in advance, and the closer it gets based on the surge forecast and other factors, we start closing the system off. And, by the time the storm comes, we have the city completely sealed off. It's basically a ring around the city to protect it and prevent storm surge from entering it. And so we just started closing gates, and there's 260 gates approximately in our portion of the system. And we start closing gates and sealing the system off.
Now that the storm has passed, is the danger totally gone? What will you be looking for in coming days to make sure the system is working properly? We're hearing in some places there are still these warnings of floods, flash flooding. What's it like there, and what does this mean?
Yeah, so for us, the system, the danger has passed. But what we do is after a system passes, after a hurricane passes, we start preparing for the next one. So we get out immediately, start inspecting the system, documenting any damages, any erosion, and making repairs. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next 2 or 3 days, is just looking at the system, making sure we inspect it from one end of the system to the other, and documenting any needed repairs and making those repairs.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much for your time this morning and walking us through this. And we are just so happy to hear that it worked as well as it did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Health officials are concerned hurricane shelters could become the next flashpoint for more COVID-19 infections in Louisiana. It's a state that was already battling a surge in cases before Ida made landfall on Sunday. As of yesterday afternoon, state officials said nearly 2,000 people were seeking shelter in 36 different locations. That number is expected to rise as more people are rescued from their homes. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards says the state plans on getting hotel rooms to help relieve the pressure on shelters. But he still called on people to wear masks and follow social distancing protocols while inside.
I have to keep reminding people that whether we like it or not, we're still in a COVID environment. It is a very difficult COVID environment where 100% of our cases today are attributable to the Delta variant, which is highly transmissible. So please make sure that you're as safe as possible wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And these sheltering operations and transportation and evacuation operations, everything we're doing needs to be done with COVID in mind.
Of course, this is also an issue for homeless shelters. We're joined now by David Botner, Executive Director of New Orleans Mission, an organization that helps shelter homeless people. David, thanks so much for joining us. You know, we've seen the damage from Ida, the rescues and evacuations. What are you seeing inside of your shelters right now? And are you taking in Ida evacuees?
So but shelters on all of our campuses are completely full. Last night we had well over 300 guests in all of our facilities, which are in New Orleans, Hammond, and Lacombe. So I imagine over the next weeks we will see some evacuees. I know that during Katrina, there was some 18,000 homeless people. I don't think that we'll have those types of numbers, but we do know that we're going to see numbers that will be far greater than we're normally handling.
As we mentioned, COVID remains a huge concern, especially in Louisiana. How are you dealing with the possibility of sick people staying in your shelters? Is there space to make sure people can be quarantined without infecting anyone else? What are the precautions you're taking?
So great question. I want to say that the interesting thing among the homeless, since COVID has begun, New Orleans Mission and all of our campuses has had less than 57 cases, and the city of New Orleans has not experienced at the New Orleans Mission in this city one death. So while people had gotten sick, we've seen over almost 6,000 people. So our numbers are extremely low. We do have, when everyone comes in, obviously we test for fever. And then if they have a fever, we're able to, right now, quarantine them in our day rooms. Unfortunately, our day rooms have no power, so this presents a whole lot of complexity. We don't have power on any of our campuses. So just in helping this number of people without power, and then you add COVID on top of it, it is a concern, but my staff has been so amazing through this. We feel that God's favor has been upon us, and we have been very blessed through this time.
Without power, though, it could last days, even weeks. I mean, how long can you shelter people if you don't have power?
So this is what we've been discussing with our local leaders. We're doing it now, but we really need the community to help us. We need generators. We need generators to power 30,000 square foot building. So we're talking about generators that are, $60,000 and $80,000 in some cases. So we're trying to borrow one currently. We think we have one. We had one last night. We were trying to power up. They couldn't get it started. So we are looking for another option today. It is definitely challenging, but we know that God has not brought us this far to keep people safe, and we desire them to be safe and cared for too.
Yeah. How many of these generators do you need? And if you are struggling to get them, then is there a plan B?
Well, I mean, the plan B is we have to have them, because the main campus that helps 200 people a night more, that campus, if you can't get a huge generator, then we would literally have to close that down. So there's no plan B. The smaller generators that we need at other campuses, we are able to manage. It's extremely difficult, but we can get the smaller generators and power up certain parts of the buildings, and they're smaller dorm settings, so it's a little bit more manageable.
All right, David Botner, we are thinking of you and all the work you're doing. I hope you can get the generators that you need to really keep protecting people. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, mask mandate bans in several states, they're now under federal investigation.
Yeah, up next, legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us to explain why the issue has become a question about civil rights after the break. The federal government could start flexing its muscle to take on state mask mandate bans.
The Department of Education has opened a civil rights investigation into whether those mask policies in 5 states discriminate against students with disabilities or others at higher risk of COVID.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now to break down the federal government's move against mask bans.
So, Danny, first of all, the civil rights probe targets Iowa, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah. So why open this investigation, especially under a civil rights discrimination lens?
According to the Secretary of Education, they've received a number of complaints from parents, and that's usually how these investigations begin. This is not the Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Justice. This is for the Department of Education. And it's interesting that the Secretary has already announced that these bans are, quote, unacceptable, and now his department's conducting an investigation. So if you're working on that investigation, you're probably going to skew it a little towards what the boss has already said is going on. So I would, if I were a betting person, I would bet on a conclusion of this investigation that indeed these states are violating federal law.
Now, if this goes past an investigation, what could the federal government's legal arguments look like for overturning these bans?
This is the process in the Department of Education. They will issue a letter of findings of fact. They'll send a letter if there is a violation to the offender, so to speak, in this case, the states, saying what they violated. And very specifically, what they're looking for is violations of disabilities laws. In other words, are students being discriminated against based on their disabilities? And the source of their power is 2 statutes, one that prohibits schools that receive federal funding, which is quite a few, and then another law that flat out allows them to regulate what local and state education facilities, schools, can do. So the federal government has the power here, but it issues a letter saying, hey, here's what we found wrong, here's what you need to fix. And if they don't fix, those schools could lose their federal funding, a threat often used, but rarely actually deployed.
Yeah, so I mean, that sort of begs my next question. What is the process of actually overturning these bans? What does that look like? Do they go to court, or how do they make that happen?
They can go to court, and that issue, that finding of fact, basically paves the road for a lawsuit. After all, what plaintiff's attorney wouldn't like a government agency that's already done all the discovery and the fact-finding for you? But on the other hand, what normally happens is they send a letter and say, here's what you need to fix, and the school or whoever they send it to can make a decision. We're either going to comply and enter into an agreement, or we're going to fight it.
All right, Danny Savalos. Danny, thanks for your expertise on this important topic. Appreciate it.
As always, thanks.
Coming up, preschool-aged children getting kicked out of class.
Yeah, it turns out it's more common than you might think. Details from a new study about why it's happening and what can be done to stop it. You're watching Morning News Now.
This week, NBC News platforms are highlighting the mental health challenges that young people face in our series, Kids Under Pressure.
Yeah, and this morning we're taking a look at why hundreds of preschoolers across the country are being kicked out of school daily and what some educators are doing to help keep them in school. Here's NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett.
Lance Bassiano's high energy applauded at Little League, but when it came time for him to go to preschool, that energy caused trouble.
It was 9 daycares in less than 2 years.
So this happened over and over and over again?
Over and over and over again. This has been such a journey. We were very embarrassed by it because we're thinking, what are we doing wrong as parents? You have a child that keeps getting expelled out of school. You don't know how to react to it or what you're supposed to change or do.
Daycare after daycare told the Bassianos that Lance could not come back, saying he was a lot to handle.
The sad thing is it affected him greatly because he felt unwanted.
It's more common than you might think. Nationwide, it's estimated that 250 children are suspended or expelled from preschool each school day, more than 65,000 every year, according to a study published in the International Journal of Child Abuse and Neglect.
When teachers were highly stressed, they were more likely to report expelling multiple kids. And also when teachers felt that they were unsupported in their work with parents, or when they had negative perceptions of parents, they tended to report expelling more kids. And so that really spoke to us about it being an adult issue. It's less about children's behavior and more about adults' perceptions of and responses to kids' behavior.
Preschool and early childcare is essential for young children. Their development and brain growth is the most dramatic during this time, learning foundational skills and building social relationships.
When we don't invest in children in these first 5 years, we're all going to have to pay for that later. Expulsions, especially in early childhood, are a symptom of a much larger problem, of a broken, underfunded, undervalued, fragmented childcare and early learning system in our country.
Illinois tried one solution, banning early childhood expulsions altogether, instead encouraging childcare centers to use local resources.
It's one of 6 states and D.C. to pass legislation protecting children from expulsions in both public school and private childcare settings. In the last 7 years, more and more states are addressing the problem in some capacity. And it's helped. Before the law, nearly 13 out of every 1,000 children were expelled in Illinois. It's down to just over 3 out of every 1,000. But researchers found that twice as many children were informally pushed out. And the expulsions that did happen were disproportionately among boys and black children.
You have a little body with really big feelings, and they don't know what to do with them.
Lindsay Percival has run the Learning Bridge Early Learning Center in Evanston for 10 years. She points out that the new law is flawed.
The problem is that we have the mandate and we don't have any resources backing it up. Really, the only resource that doesn't cost a lot of money is going to somewhere like Action for Children and having one of their therapists come and help us. But they are only with us for about 6 weeks. And that's not enough time for them to build a relationship with the child, and it's not enough time for them to visit with the parents.
It's an emotional struggle plaguing young children, even pre-pandemic, adding to parents' anxieties as their kids go back to school this year. Smaller class sizes as a pandemic precaution actually helped, but only briefly. As kids are going back to school and daycares full-time this year, there are new challenges.
I really do worry about how the workforce shortage and program closures can increase either formal expulsions or just denial of care for kids and families.
What would you say to parents who are experiencing this, who might feel like this is their fault?
The first thing is for parents to take a deep breath and recognize that some of this is very normal. 20% of kids are going to show challenging behavior at some point before kindergarten entry. It's a very developmentally typical experience. Children's challenging behavior should really be reframed as their attempts to communicate.
For Lance, this proved to be true. As he got older, he's having less issues at school.
Do you like school better than daycares?
Yes! While researchers point to the overall need for more funding and resources to solve this outright, in the meantime, they say the first step for parents and teachers is to act with empathy.
Good to see some solutions there that are working out for that family.
Absolutely, and act with empathy seems like a pretty good solution to a lot of things. But
apply that to everything.
Yeah. No, but and so sweet to see that as he grew up a little bit, he's doing better in school.
Yes,
it's great news.
Right.
Yeah.
That does it for this hour morning news now.
But the news continues right now.